I love the theme of this conference, which is to discuss, I guess, the failures and some of the mistakes we've made. I entitled this talk, "I Can Still Feel the Pain," because I really can still feel the pain. And when preparing for it, it saddened me. There was a lot of pain and a lot of things that happened during different parts of my career that the memories came back to me and refreshed me. And the beautiful thing, though, is that I learned even more by just preparing for this presentation than I did when I experienced the thing. So I think reviewing and reflecting is something that is useful, and probably not just something that is sort of blaming the past or looking for the cause of problems, but something that can help us sort of ferret out learnings and help maybe do things differently in the future, or maybe learn to avoid things completely. In either case, I'm going to share 5 mistakes that I made and some of the learnings from them. They're all things that happened at different times in my career. And if I have time, I have an extra bonus one that came to mind just this morning when I was sort of discussing this talk with my wife. And there's one extra one I want to throw in there. So because I have about 25 minutes to chat right now, I'm gonna share the stories as if they were miniature lightning talks. If you've ever seen a lightning talk, they're usually 3 to 5 minutes long. And my hope is that I can share each of these little experience reports in about 5 minutes, and then I'll be available on chat on Slack afterwards if there's some Q&A, and or you can keep in touch with me any way you like, forever and for always. So the first mistake that I'm going to talk about, first mistake, and I call this "Leadership is not a popularity contest." I was a leader, I guess. I had a team, I suppose. I was hired fresh from school to sort of manage a small department of people who were doing programming and testing and technical writing and documentation and all sorts of stuff for graphic software in the CAD/CAM business. I was fresh from school. I was an engineer, a young engineer. I knew a lot about computers and programming academically. I've written a lot of code. And I guess because I had technical proficiency, I was somehow made in charge. But I didn't know anything about management. I didn't know anything about leadership. I just knew about sort of the technical work. And so I sort of felt I wanted a good team spirit. I wanted people to be motivated. And as you can tell, I like to be sort of vocal, and I describe things, and I get emotional, and I try to give engaging talks, and I think I'm pretty good at it. But at the time, I wanted my team to be motivated. So I sort of felt, okay, so let's, have social events. Let's do things with the team. And I started spending a lot of my effort organizing, for example, get-togethers, and we would go every Friday to a local pub, and we actually organized. I organized all sorts of social things. I spent so much time and energy making sure that people were sort of engaged in all these social activities that I was losing sight of some of the actual strange dynamics that were coming up. And what ended up happening was that there was basically a blur between my personal life, my friendship with people, and my ability to do the work that had to be done. And I found out that it was stunning that some of the problems that came out were because I was too involved with the parts of people's lives that was their personal private business that maybe I could have known about it if they decided to share it with me. But because I was doing all this social stuff, I found that there were conflicts, and some of them were pretty severe. In fact, I found out some people were having a hard time in their relationships and were getting divorced, and they didn't really want people to know about it. And I had one person who was really, really, really upset when he found out that I had been robbed at a local gymnasium, and they wanted to sort of throw a chair through the window of the gymnasium to punish them, saying, why would someone do that? And all this weird behavior led me to be quite burned out, and actually I had to step away from work for a while to sort of reconnect and refocus. And so what I've learned from this experience, of course, is that as leader, you're not the social coordinator of the team, and you should really build teams with people and focus on the shared values that you have related to getting the work done, and let friendships and other relationships develop if it's going to be that way. They'll develop with time and they'll develop naturally, and you can't sort of force the dynamic as the leader is not the social coordinator, and it's not that everyone has to like you that matters. It's really the respect that people get by working with you to achieve goals with shared values. So this was a big mistake I made. And I guess I learned so much. I learned about situational leadership from this. And I urge you to learn as much as you can about situational leadership and how you should really adapt your leadership style to the circumstance and care about people at different sort of levels of skill and responsibility. So, first mistake: leadership is not a popularity contest. Second, I learned this also the hard way: delegate the problem, not the solution. Wow, this was a tough one. I was developing a system called GBase. It was a database management system for CAD/CAM, storing what are called finite elements. It was actually a technically brilliant problem to work on. And I was sort of managing the team. And I had a bunch of people working with me, testing and programming it. And there was particularly some of them that were hired to help me on this project. I had hired them. And I started to sort of give them very, very specific technical work to do. And I was ridiculously specific. I would go and figure out in incredible detail technically what was needed from them. And what I did was I basically asked them to do these things. And it was I didn't know better, so I was sort of delegating to them a technical solution that I had figured out, figuring I was the manager, so I'm going to go figure out what the technical solution is, give people the technical solution and have them do it. And one thing's for sure, I learned the hard way: this didn't scale. Like if I did the work myself and other people's work and other people's, I was doing all this detailed design work. I was micromanaging people without knowing it, and this ticked people off. And I actually lost employees not understanding why, because I thought they were doing really cool technical work on really cool things. And it really basically went through this whole experience. I went through this whole experience for several months, lost 2 employees. And I realized afterwards that I was doing something wrong. And really, it took a while to phrase it this way, but I was actually delegating a detailed technical solution to people, micromanaging them, and I should have been taking them and saying, okay, let me delegate you the problem. Now, of course, you have to make sure they're able to solve the problem. So you have to, as a manager, choose what way you're going to manage them. Are you going to coach them? Are you going to direct them? Are you going to delegate completely? And you have to look at their skills. So do they have the skill to the job, or do they have to develop the skill? And you have to look at their professional competencies. So these are deliberate things. Choosing management style deliberately, context driven, right? Deliberately choose the style, choose the appropriate style for the situation. And that means also that when you hit a new situation, be prepared to adapt. And I also learned to try to find someone to basically guide me and mentor me a little bit. But that was very painful, especially when you have people that you thought were really great people to work with, and technically smart and great. You thought it was a good fit, but they just couldn't deal with being micromanaged. And they basically left before diving in too deep. And of course, what can I say? It was a mistake. It was a big mistake. So that's the second one. Delegate the problem, not the solution. The third one: technical competence is not enough. Now, technical competence is important, and I urge you to build technical competencies and skills in technical things. But I've learned through this story that it's not enough. I was testing low-level device software that was controlling graphics cards, bus-mounted cards that you plugged into a computer, the lowest level software. And I had to make my own tools, my own debuggers, my own testing tools for this. It was an era where we couldn't just go and buy a fancy tool. We had to build and construct all the tools ourselves. And I was going nuts. This was a very, very difficult bug that I was chasing down. And I couldn't understand why it happened on some boards and not on other boards, and why it happened on some computers, not other computers. And I worked through all sorts of angles. I spent days and days and then weeks on this problem. And finally, one night, I woke up at 2 in the morning and I had the aha syndrome. I had this aha realization, and I went into the office late that night, and I figured out what the problem was. I figured it out, and I was so proud. It was just a delight. And the problem had to do with knowledge I had about how the CPU, the processor, was implemented, how signals were going on the bus, the actual hardware bus of it, the timing of that. And I found out that there was a hardware bug in the graphics card. There was a hardware bug that I had found out. And it was the technical details of this for me was just fascinating. I just loved it. And so I took that bug and I wrote the code to demonstrate very clearly how to generate the bug. And I went and I contacted the engineers and the people responsible. And I went, I did a real cool presentation. This was Rob, proud, technically using all my knowledge and skills and demonstrating this to the key people who would have to fix it or resolve it. And when I showed them the bug, I was proud. And they just looked at it and they said, yeah, okay. So, and I was, what do you mean so? I said, well, you obviously know how to write software to avoid this problem. And I said, well, yeah, so do that. And we're not going to change the hardware. And that was the end of it. And I said, wow, I spent all this time, all this energy, all this money trying to figure out this bug. And I wasted my time. The actual people that I thought who would be most impressed by this were sort of upset that I spent so much time and money in something that was obviously I could work around it in software. And I came to realize that just because I had a technically cool thing and I could get down and drill down and figure out the real cause of a problem, that maybe I should have understood a little bit about purpose, a little bit about context. Like, why was I doing this work? What mattered to people? And as soon as I sort of found the symptom of the problem, I maybe should have understood a little bit more about that bug, that context. Like, what mattered? Did this matter? And it turned out that if I could work around the problem, that it didn't matter. Maybe they would put in a list for the next time they design a board to avoid that problem. But the hardware tooling costs were so expensive that it just never made sense for them to fix such problems. What they always did, and this I learned, was worked around them, and that's why they hired people like me to write the low-level software so that we could not just control the hardware, but avoid the bugs in it. And basically, this was my beginning of understanding that context matters, and understanding that just because I could find a really cool technical problem didn't mean that anyone cared, and it didn't mean that anybody would want to fix it. And I learned that I got to stop drilling down so deep and getting such detail until I really understand purpose, until I really understand the business, technical, organizational factors surrounding the problem space. So then I can drill down, and if, before committing huge amount of resources to it, make some sort of decision. Is it really worth it? Do we really need to go and drill down that much? Or is there some other solution that is good enough? And some people call this type of decision-making satisficing. You have to experience this type of bug, I think, to learn about this, because I was proud. I had done a fantastic job. I had isolated it. I knew exactly at the level of hardware how to replicate the problem, and yet all of that information was waste. It was all waste. Technical competence is not enough. Then there's the issue of stakeholders. I learned that I have to always watch out for stakeholders. Somehow, identifying the right stakeholders makes a big difference. Identifying the wrong stakeholders makes a big difference. It's a question of, for me, always look out now for stakeholders. Even if you think you've got the right ones, maybe you don't. So here's the story. I was hired to set up the whole software testing and build processing team at myvirtualmodel.com, which was doing the back-end software for the very, very famous landsend.com, which, by the way, was award-winning stuff. We did really great work. It was fantastic. The team that I set up, I hired everybody. I set up the workflow, the process flow, the it was just, I thought it was great. It was beautiful, and we had really nice, well understood processes. And I had the people who were what I thought the product owners involved in all the prioritization decisions about bugs, the prioritization decisions about requirements, the prioritization decisions about the scope and focus of our testing. And I really knew the stakeholders that I thought were important. And so we're there, we're getting ready for a release. There's a release coming up, I would say, if you imagine this is a Friday, the release had to be done, deployed probably the next Wednesday. There's a couple of days from where we were to the deployment. And I was really in control of this project. Everything was well understood, well defined, and well controlled. I was having my normal Friday afternoon jam session, this meeting with the team that I was working with, and we all sort of had a good handle on what was going on. We felt very upbeat about this release. Things were going well. Suddenly, walking into the room is a not too tall person with a clipboard and a pen. And this person is hitting the clipboard, whack, 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 with the pen. Not too tall a gentleman walking into the door, whack, 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 whack. And I'm looking at this guy saying, who the heck is this? And what's with that clipboard? Whack, whack, whack. And then he sort of jumped in front of everybody and started sort of being very clear and directive to us. And he said things loud and really with authority. And he said stuff like, okay, here's a list of what you have to do for the coming release. And he had a list. And he had a list of, I think it was 13 or 17 things. I remember it's a prime number under 20 and greater than 10. So he had this list. And on the list, there were some of the things that were on our list that we knew about. And some of the things that we didn't know about, and some of the things that we knew about but we weren't going to do, and some of the things that we didn't know about that he was saying we had. And all this stuff was relevant stuff, and I never knew or saw this man before in my life. Who is this guy? What's going on? And why are you being so directive? Well, it turned out that this guy was the president of the company. He was the guy who was signing my contracts and my checks, and I had never met him before. And he had this list. Why does he have this list? Well, it turned out that this president actually, he was, you might think that's a very bad experience I went through, because it was really terrible. Like, I didn't realize the president was so involved in the project. I didn't realize that the president was actually a key stakeholder in this project. Well, I was wrong. In fact, every week the president spoke to all of his most important accounts, different ones at different times, and he kept tabs on projects and things that were going on. Mostly it was business related stuff with sales and marketing related stuff. But when major releases came around, apparently he talked about the major releases, and he had the list that was basically from his meeting with the customer of the things that they were expecting for the upcoming release. And that's what he wanted to make sure. So he suddenly put on, I'm the manager, I'm the boss hat, and came in and started being very directive of us. He knew nothing about software engineering, nothing about testing, knew how to sign checks very well. And because he was so good at signing the checks, and because he was so clear, that we basically dropped what we were doing, changed everything, did what he said, still deployed the software, ruined our weekend, by the way. And we got the thing out the door, and it took me months to get things back in order. And I want to tell you that I learned so much from that experience. I learned that there's a lot of stakeholders, and that you've got to keep your eye out for them and identify the stakeholders. And what he was doing was excellent, not bad. It was good. It's just, it was me who screwed up. I didn't identify him. If I had identified him, I would have gotten his buy-in for how we actually manage and prioritize things on the project. He would have been aware of our workflow. I would have been aware of his calls. And in the end, what ended up happening was we got the product manager to actually talk to the president before and after these calls and subsequent meetings. And it really helped things get a lot better quickly. So keep your eyes out, watch for stakeholders, and then get stakeholders to buy into how you make decisions. That's identifying the right stakeholder. A painful experience. Next one. The time is flying. I have lightning talk style here. Organizations change around you. Organizations change despite you. Organizations, I've come to learn, don't care about who Rob is. So the story starts off in, I guess, if you will, recently. and I don't want to mention the name, but there's a major a customer that I worked with for years and years and years. And this customer I had worked very hard for, and my ethic, it was my feeling that in this customer that I wanted people to think, hey, when we're thinking about Rob, we're thinking of someone who's helping us make money. I wanted people to look at Rob as, yes, he's a consultant, we're paying him, but he's helping us make money. He's helping us meet our goals. He's helping us generate revenue. It's not just because he's a good tester. It's not just because he's a good teacher. It's not just because he's a good consultant. It's because he's helping us succeed. And that's the attitude that I cultivated. That's what I wanted. And this was going on for years with this customer. And then suddenly they got taken over by another company. They got taken over, reorganized. People were put into responsible positions whom I did not know and never heard of. And basically, I was quickly ushered out of a lot of the work that I was done, and there was a lot of the projects that I would have been considered on that I didn't. There were agreements and ideas and things that we had in the past that were just lost. And I realized, what was I doing? Why did I not know how to deal with this? And of course, this is recent, but this has happened to me actually 2 or 3 times, and the learning is painful. But the organization changes around me, and despite me, the organization doesn't remember that 2 years ago I did something great for them. The organization doesn't remember how wonderful it was that I brought them into account. The organization could care less. The organization is worried about their short-term goals, the profits. The organization is not a person. Now, there's people. And I think it's important to build relationships with people that are lasting. And I think there's important things you should do with communities. You should build relationships in communities and help evolve the practice of what you're doing. But if you're giving your soul to the company, that's a mistake. That's what I've learned. At least it's been a mistake for me. And what I've learned from that is to basically always make sure that the work I'm doing is of value now. It's not, hey, I want to remember Rob. Yes, Rob helped us make profit 2 years ago in that great project, and that was fantastic. I want them to see the value I'm doing now, short term, now, not something that's sort of abstract, not something that is something that's intangible. I want it to be tangible, and that means that when I'm working on a project, I want to be available how my work influences the organization, how my work helps them make money, helps them succeed in whatever their goals are. And I urge people in testing to take heed of this. I think it's very important when you're doing your work to be aware of how you're delivering value now at this time. Don't just ride on your history. Don't just ride on some great project you did 2 years ago. Don't just ride on some technical thing, because the things will change around you. And when they change around you, I think there's a couple of choices you have. One choice that you have is to move on, and the other choice you have is to change what you're doing. But they're not going to wait for you. It will change around you, and it will change despite you. So this is basically something I've learned. And there's another case that I did when I was in the medical software business. And I was working for some people that brought me into there, and they hired me, and there was a beautiful structure. And another company bought that company, and the new management just put in people from the board down on top of me that I just didn't know who these people were, and they didn't know who I was. And yeah, I was like, Rob's a great software engineer, but right now, today, what value are you having? And I had a lot of value, I guess, but it was not the company that I went to work for. It was a different organization. And I've learned basically that is likely to happen, and it's not a bad thing. It's not, I don't want to be judgmental here. I just want to be prepared for it. And in my career, this has been one of the hardest hits I've ever had. Is it the company that I put my heart and soul in? It failed, and I should have learned this so long ago. And I still reflect back, and this is very hard to prepare this presentation to look at that. Is I love and respect all the people I worked with, but what I was doing was not necessarily valued by the organizations, and I don't think organizations will ever value things. It's really something it's all people, and it's all what is your value now to help achieve the goals, and make sure that that's something that you're aware of. So that's the official 5. Now I have a bonus one, and this one is as I reflected today with my wife about this presentation. It's just something that came to mind. in my career, in the earliest days of my career, I was technically very, very sharp. I was, and still, I guess I am technically sharp. I'm proud of my skills. I'm not ashamed of them. I'm not saying they're gone, but I was really a programmer in a time when there weren't a lot of programmers. I was a tester in a time when no one knew what testing really was. I was doing really cool cutting edge work, and I was sort of proud of it. And I would treat with disrespect people who were salesmen. I thought they were all used car salesmen trying to sell hardware or software, and I just didn't trust them, didn't like them. I just felt very bad when I saw a sales presentation. I just thought the salesmen were just basically trying to trick people into parting with their money and misrepresenting what software could do. And so I just had this real negative thing. And I have to tell you, for several years in my career, like the first, I don't know, from 1982 to 2000, I had this problem. I didn't have this huge, strong respect for salespeople. And I guess I met a lot of salespeople who weren't necessarily skilled. And I also had the problem with people in product marketing communications. So it turns out I didn't build relationships with these people. When I started my own business, I was very successful in my business. And then at a certain point in time, I realized, holy cow, I don't know how to do sales and marketing. I wonder why I went through such a long career and I have no knowledge there. I have no relationships there. I had no people there. And I learned basically that it's very, very, very important to build relationships with people with different skills from yours and in different parts of the business from you. And to be not just respectful of them, but to trust them in their space and not to judge them because they don't know how to program or test something. It doesn't mean that they're weak. They just have their space, and that space might be someday very important to you. So I guess the point is to don't build your bridges and don't make barriers to people in other departments, most specifically sales. A good salesman is hard to find, and good marketing people are hard to find, and you got to cherish them. Cherish them, find them, respect them, cherish them. That is it for my talk. I hope I fit the time frame well. It's been a delight.
Rob, your energy was all we needed by the time we end up and wrap up, and I'm so honored and thankful to you. I will quickly take the questions that we have here. Thank you, Jugal, for asking that. I was going to ask the same question. What is the secret of your energy?
What is the secret of my energy? My passion. I really I don't know. I love community. I love sharing, and I've just developed feeding off of that energy. I don't know what the secret is. I think really do what you love and love what you do. And I want to tell you something that you might not see, but sitting right next to me is my wife Anne, and she is my inspiration. So yesterday was our 39th anniversary.
Congratulations!
So we're having an upbeat workshop here. 39 years.
Excellent. On behalf of the Test Tribe and all of us that are privileged to listen to you, congratulations to both of you, Rob and Anne. Another question we have: what phase of your career you enjoyed the most, and when you realize you have great leadership qualities?
I never looked at my career from a point of view of phases, but there was a point in time when I worked at Alice Technologies, and I basically worked there for about 10 years. So I guess it's like the middle phase of my career. And I was trusted to do a lot of cool things. And what was amazing was I got to interact with other companies that are doing related work. And we had to get our processes to mesh with them. And so everywhere I went, it was different. They were doing the same type of thing, but in totally different ways. And it was to be being paid to learn how to get different people to work together was sort of, for me, one of the most amazing phases, if you call it a phase of my career. But I think I try to make the best of all. Right now, I'm trying to figure out what is the next phase. I'm trying to do a little bit more teaching, try different styles of instruction. But all of them, I think, have been a joy. However, probably that period at Alice Technologies, 10 and a half years, that part where I got to interact with lots and lots of other companies and lots of other people on every single project. You know, it was like a different life cycle. So there was never a rut. There was never boredom. There was never a chance to get like complacent with our approach. It was always different. And I love that part.
So thank you so much, Rob. It was an honor, privilege, and everything else that you can imagine one can express gratitude for. We are honored to have you, and that was the very perfect way to call off this conference. Thank you for your time. There is a Slack channel dedicated for your talk, and people can interact more with you there. On that note, Rob, congratulations to both of you once again, and we look forward to celebrate many more occasions with you. Thank
Absolutely.
you.
I'll be on Slack if there's any more questions.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Yep.
See you.
Thanks, guys. Bye.